Cincy Shirts was started out of, I should say our T-shirt company was started out of a desire for me to always want to love to do stand-up. So when I started doing stand-up, it was a month before my 21st birthday, and I was working at Procter & Gamble in the IT department, and I immediately fell in love with stand-up. I had only started because I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, and I wasn't sure how I could make that a reality. My only thought was maybe if I could just learn to make strangers laugh at an open mic night, that could be how I find out if there's something there, because I always was the funny guy. I played sports, but I wasn't never the best. I was like the funny guy. And my dad was the funny guy. He was a model maker at Kenner Toys downtown. He made Star Wars toys when I was a kid. I think that job kept him really young, and he surrounded himself with people that shared a similar sense of humor and a similar look at life of wanting to stay young. And I think that humor was sort of the through line for my whole childhood. It was something that I noticed very early with my dad, that he was always the one that would make people laugh, and people went to for a laugh, and he sort of endeared himself to people because of having that quality. And then, my sense of humor was shaped by Saturday Night Live and, classic 80s comedies, Caddyshack and Ghostbusters. And, that was Airplane. I always loved like puns and wordplay. And so, as I got into, out of high school, and I was working in corporate America already, I still had this desire to like be on Saturday Night Live. And I really had no plans to do anything with it until I was at Willie's Sports Bar in Westchester, having dinner. I would go there every night after I got off work, before I'd head home. My parents were living in Westchester at that time. And I kind of got to be friends with the staff because I'm not a drinker, but I was like in the bar by myself having dinner every night, not drinking. So I just kind of, got to be somewhat of a regular. And I met this guy named John Gamber who changed my life. And he was very funny. He was the manager there. And he would deliver food to people's tables in character, Jack Nicholson and Rodney Dangerfield. And he was he had these voices and just this presence about him. And he and I got to be sort of friendly. And he made a comment one night after something I said where he was like, "Man, you're pretty funny. You ever thought about doing anything with that?" And I was like, and I told him, I was like, "Well, I thought maybe I'd be on SNL one day, maybe try stand-up comedy or something." And he got like really serious. He goes, Are you joking?" And I was like, "No, I mean, I've thought about it, And he goes, "I'm going to tell you something that nobody here knows about me, and I'd like to keep it between us." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I have a doctorate in theater." He said, "I studied in Los Angeles, and I moved here during the stand-up comedy boom of the 80s when Cincinnati had 3 comedy clubs. And I was actually teaching a class at, I think it was Cincinnati State, in stand-up comedy. He was teaching a class on how to write it, and then their final was to do an open mic night. And he's like, when the boom died down, I had to, figure out a way to support my family. And I got, I took a job working in the restaurant industry, and that's where I'm here. He's like, nobody here knows that about me. He goes, but, I still have that passion. And he was like, if I could just help you do an open mic night, he goes, I can't tell you how much that would mean to me to kind of dip my toe back into that water of something that I love doing. I just haven't done in forever. And so he said, you're going to do an open mic night. And he made me sign up I tried to sign up in Cincinnati. I couldn't get anybody on the phone. So I ended up signing up in Dayton. It was like 3 months out. So in November, I signed up to do an open mic night in February, and he was like, all right, time to get to work. And he gave me books he wanted me to read. He gave me a microphone so that I could hear how I sounded coming through a microphone. And then I would write material and bring it to him. And then he would say, this is too easy. Everybody talks about this, focus on this. Like, he really helped me a lot before I ever even set a foot on stage. And so it came time to do the open mic night, and the guy from the club here in Cincinnati, Go Bananas, calls me and he says, "Hey, we have a cancellation for tomorrow. Do you want to do it?" Now I'm supposed to be in Dayton the next week, and I have like 75 people coming to watch me do my first open mic night. So I told the guy at Go Bananas, I was like, yes. And then I didn't tell anybody else. But I was like, I can run through this set one time before all my friends and family see me.
How did he know? I want you to jump back on, but how did the Go Bananas guy know to call you?
I had left voicemails saying I would like to get booked for the open mic night, and none of the calls were ever returned. And then it just so happened that the week before I'm supposed to be in Dayton, I guess it got to my name on the list. So I went and did it. And like I said, it was a month before my 21st birthday, and probably by 7 or 8 years, I was the youngest person there. Now, today it's different. This was 98. So today it's different. I mean, there's like kids in high school doing stand-up comedy. But back then, like, I was super, super young. And so I get up there, and it doesn't go amazing, but it doesn't go horrible, probably like it goes for a lot of people on their first time, because I had kind of had like professional coaching on just some small things to avoid doing or saying when I was up there. But it was enough that the people there were like, "How long have you been doing this?" And I was like, "That was my first time." And they're like, "What? You know, you didn't talk about how bright the lights were. You didn't stumble. You didn't, you know what I mean?" And so he helped me avoid a lot of pitfalls that I think a lot of people fall into when they first get going. And it was huge for me. But I fell in love with it instantly. And so now I'm working at P&G during the day, and I'm doing stand-up at night, and I'm a sponge. I'm at the club all the time, paying attention to the professionals, not just the material, but just like how they interact with the audience, how they deal with when the waitress brings the checks out and the momentum comes to a complete stop, you know, how you deal with hecklers, like all that stuff. I wanted to learn as much as I could. But one thing that I noticed was the older guys had a resentment for comedy, right? It was all they knew. They'd been doing it for, 30 years. They had no relationships with their ex-wife or their children. They were living out of a suitcase because they'd given their life to comedy, and this is where it had taken them. So at a very impressionable part of my life, doing stand-up, I realized that I never wanted to become that. I never wanted to get to a point where I was doing stand-up because I had to, and that I resented it for all the things that it took away from me throughout my life, right? And so as I started to get out on the road more often, I found myself having days completely free where I would be just sitting in a hotel room, maybe going to play golf somewhere or something. But I had all this free time because I was literally just sitting around waiting for the show that night. And so I was dating a girl here in Cincinnati who's a lawyer. She had, obviously put in a lot of schooling and worked a lot of crazy hours, who could not let it go that I was just working nights, a couple nights a week, a few weeks a month, right? And so she basically quit seeing me because she couldn't stand how much free time that I had, And so out of spite, the t-shirt company was born. And it was born out of two reasons. It was born out of spite for her, but also I thought, you know what? I don't need this money right now. I don't need this thing to be successful right now. But if it can be successful 10, 15 years from now, when I'm married and have kids and I don't want to be on the road all the time, then this would afford me the opportunity to still enjoy stand-up, but not do it because I had to, right? And that's actually what's come to fruition.
So you honestly had that thought. How old were you at that point when she decides she's not going to date you anymore?
So that would have been, I could remember like it was yesterday, so this would have been like probably 2005. So I was 28.
Okay. All right. So wife's starting to get a little serious.
Serious enough that,
you're having these thoughts.
Yeah.
So you can remember being that 28-year-old Josh and thinking, if I can do this for a decade so that when I do have a family down the road, that this thing can pay off the way it needs to.
Right.
Honestly thought that then.
Yes. And I'll tell you why. So at the time it was like a side hustle. It was like, you know what? I'll do this. I'll start something during the day and I'll grow it and it'll keep me busy, you know? And I'll show you that I don't have to do stand up. But that was the other thing that was kind of, and I still face that today too, is that people see like, oh, you get paid this much for working an hour, you know what I mean? Or you can take off a week at a time just because you want to. And it's like, I can because I paid my dues back then. Like that, they wouldn't be asking that question when I was like sleeping in my car at a rest area or having grilled cheese or ramen 5 nights a week. You know what I mean? Where I'd leave my apartment here in Cincinnati and I might not be back for 2.5 months because I've routed my gigs to drive me all the way out to Denver and back, you know?
An overnight success, right?
Right. They're like, oh, it must be nice to work for 45 minutes a day. You know, that and they say it in jest, and I think the people closest to me know that I pay my dues. But that was in 2005, and that's sort of the genesis of the way the T-shirt company started.